Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Brain. Today I want to take a look at the Brawler 64 Wireless Edition from Retro Fighters. This controller's been out for a little bit, but I just picked one up and thought I would share my thoughts and also go through a teardown of the controller. But first, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't yet, consider subscribing. That is the best way to let me know you enjoy the content on this channel. Now let's get started. The Brawler 64 Wireless Edition controller is a wireless controller for your Nintendo 64. This device has a receiver that goes into the Nintendo 64 in your controller port, and you can add your memory card into that part, and then it communicates wirelessly, which is really nice so you don't have to be tethered down to the Nintendo 64. It also supports being able to use 4 of these at once, so you can have 4 controllers plugged in and they all communicate separately and won't interfere with each other. I don't have 4 of them to test, but I'll take their word on it. I have no reason to believe it wouldn't work. This retails at $40, which really is not a bad price for this kind of controller.
Okay, let's take a look inside the box here. Came in this brown cardboard box marked with the color of the controller that I got. Just nice that it protected the inside box. And here's the controller. It has a very soft feel to it. Not a lot of grips, but it doesn't feel slick, just soft. Let's see, it looks like that goes into the Nintendo 64, and then a USB-C cable for charging.
And here are some close-ups of everything that comes in the box. You've got the controller, you've got the wireless receiver, and then the keychain, and the manual.
So I'm going to plug this up to the charger here. Now this is not the charging cable that came with it. Unfortunately that would not reach far enough where my desk is here, but you can see the light blinks while it's charging. But then once it's fully charged, it's supposed to, I believe, stay on. Okay, so this fully charged. It took a little less than 2 hours. I know I checked it at about an hour and a half and it hadn't stopped. And I came back and the light is off, so it does not stay on once it's fully charged. All the manual said was that it quit blinking, so I didn't know if it meant it stayed on or went off, but it does go off once it's fully charged. Okay, so this just takes a small Phillips head screwdriver to open up. And it looks to me like there's just the holes here that need to come out. These screws are definitely tight, so you want to make sure you're using the right size screwdriver tip. I'm not exactly sure which one this one is, but you can tell if it doesn't fit right, don't try to force it. There it is. Okay, so you can see the battery there, and it does say this is replaceable. I'll look to see if I can find a link for a replacement of this. If I can find one, I'll post it in the description below. But it looks fairly easy to unplug. Looks like it's kind of glued on there, so I'm not going to rip that off just yet. These are the same type screws that are in the case holding the back on, so you don't have to worry about keeping those out separate and getting them lost. Oh yeah, that's metal. Add a bit of weight to that too. Makes me wonder if they've got that in there just to weight it. Okay, so once you get those 2 screws out, this whole piece just lifts off. And here's a look at the board. The analog stick here. These membranes. Yeah, so I'm thinking this is the antenna. In fact, it says ANT right there, so yeah, that's the antenna. Probably would have been better if it was a little further out, but I guess it'll probably work just fine. They advertise, I believe, 30 feet. But yeah, that's pretty much all there is to this thing. So, okay, so this top piece here, these pins slide into here, and that connects the D-pad. So the D-pad has its own separate board. I imagine that's probably to keep it more in line, a little stiffer, so it can't move around as much. The D-pad feels pretty good, although you definitely can push in all four directions at once. So that's not great, but. So here's a closer look at the D-pad. I went ahead and pulled it off. If you do pull it off, the screws that held that top board in are a little bit smaller, so you want to separate those out. But the spike in the center of this is not sticking up above each of the directions. So that's the reason why you can press pretty much all four buttons at once. I don't know if that was done on purpose. There might be a reason for maybe cheating something or glitching something. I know some games I've heard of where you can hit like both the left and right at the same time, and that will allow you to walk through a wall or something, but I don't know of any of those type of things right offhand. But if you know of anything or any reason why you want to be able to hit all four directions at once, drop me a comment and let me know.
I want to take a little closer look at the components inside the controller here. The board's pretty straightforward. I don't really see anything in here that stands out. One thing I did notice on the A and B buttons, there are little standoffs kind of a third of the way around each button, and I'm not sure what that's for. If you'll notice from the side angle, it may be kind of hard to see. When you press the button in, it doesn't really stop the butt from going down anymore. It's still got a little ways to go before it goes all the way down. So I don't know if maybe that was a design change. Maybe the board was supposed to be up higher. Maybe it was supposed to be more in line with the D-pad. One of the things I thought of later too is the D-pad is probably attached to the top of the controller because the board is so far down for the analog stick. So I wonder if it's just maybe a design change. Another good thing to notice, all the buttons in here are keyed differently. So if you take it apart and the buttons fall out, you don't really have to worry about like which button goes where. They will only go into certain holes. So if you look at those C buttons in the top left corner here, they all have these notches around them at different points, which prevents you from putting them in the wrong slot. Of course, the first game I wanted to try with this controller is Smash Bros. 64. Now, I have to apologize for the quality of the captures here. My S-Video to HDMI adapter seemed to be having issues, but the game still controls the same, and I've got another adapter on order, but I didn't want to wait. So my first impression while playing Smash Bros. Is, one, I didn't really remember how to play the game, but after playing for a little while, I kind of remembered it. I must say it definitely is a lot more comfortable holding this controller than it is holding the center section of the traditional styled Nintendo 64 controller. I didn't really have many issues playing the game except for, of course remembering what button does what, but that's just because I hadn't played in a while. I wasn't noticing too much issues with snapback, and we'll go into this a little bit later, but overall I didn't really notice it while playing the game. And overall, it definitely was a good controller to use to play this game with. So the next obvious game I wanted to try was Mario 64. This was the first platforming game I remember that had analog controls. But one thing became obvious that I never really noticed about the game is that you really only have 3 different speeds. You have like the tiptoe walk, you've got a normal walking speed, and then you've got a full-out run. So that seemed to work fine with this controller. I didn't have any issues. It definitely felt very comfortable and didn't feel so cramped holding that center section of the traditional Nintendo 64 controller. So overall, I was happy playing this game with this controller. So now things got a little more difficult. The next game I tried was Mario Kart 64, and I happened to notice that the kart seemed really hard to control. Now, I've played Mario Kart 8 a lot, and it is really smooth. In Mario Kart 64, the controls aren't as great, obviously. It's an older game, and we were still learning analog controls in kart racing games. That being said, this seemed a lot more difficult than I really remembered. As I'm going around curves, I kept finding myself just completely veering off of the track, a lot more than I really remembered. So I decided, let me try another game, maybe it's just the controls on this. So I pulled out Episode 1 Racer, which I remembered was really easy to control, really fun, and I found the same thing happening here. And I'm thinking, well, maybe I'm just out of practice on these games. As I'm trying to go around corners, I'm just completely going off the track and having a very difficult time controlling it. So I decided, let me try the original official Nintendo controller, and I did notice quite a bit of improvement. It seemed a lot easier to control. Some of that could be chalked up to I now know the track, I'm very familiar with the controls, but it definitely did not feel like if I pressed all the way to the left, I would just quickly veer off the track completely. It seemed a lot easier to control. So I wasn't sure of a good way to record this, so I've got a USB to Nintendo 64 controller adapter that lets me hook the controller up to my PC. So I'm running the game controller settings, and you can see when I move the analog stick, the cursor moves in that screen, but I've got a little bit of an extra area that as I move, that cursor doesn't bounce back and forth. So doing a little bit of troubleshooting online, I did find that this is supposed to be a feature and not a bug. So apparently the analog stick goes over the normal range, and so that would explain why in some games when I went all the way to the right in a racing game, I would just veer off the course really fast. So some of the games were still reading that extra length of input. So I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. I wish it would be an option to be able to turn that on and off, because it does make racing games very difficult to control. You have to be very careful with the analog stick. So for a comparison, here's an original Nintendo 64 controller. As you can see, as I travel all the way to the edge, the cursor pretty much stops at the same time the controller does. There's not any extra wiggle room at the end. Also, I wanted to point out that I did notice a little bit of snapback. Doesn't happen every time, but you can see there every once in a while the cursor will jump all the way to the right, even though I'm snapping it to the left. And that's called snapback. So if you're playing a game and you're trying to move quickly to the left and you just hit it like that, you might end up turning back the opposite direction. So it's something to be aware of. This is not uncommon in a lot of analog controllers, but I don't think I have as much of an issue with the original Nintendo 64 controller. My final thoughts for the controller are I'm pretty well pleased with it. Overall, I like it a lot for most of the games that I tried. However, I can't really recommend it for most racing games. The ones that I played, my hand would cramp just trying to make minute movements on the analog stick and not veer off of the course. However, there could be some games where that extra distance on the analog stick could be an advantage. If you know of one, let me know. Drop a comment. Also, do you have the Brawler 64 controller, and have you noticed any of the same analog issues that I did? I did contact Retro Fighter support to see if there was a way to adjust the sensitivity, and if I hear back something, I'll pin it in the comments. I want to thank you for watching, and be good.